A perfect car is a combination of comfortability, brutal acceleration, absurd top speed, and inconspicuous looks that only an expert observer can detect. It was a car that scared automakers as well as its own government, and it became uncatchable by authorities, and it wasn't badged Mercedes-Benz or BMW. Instead, it was a joint collaboration between General Motors and their newly purchased Lotus Engineering, called the Type 104, aka the Lotus Carlton. In this episode of A Car in History, we'll take an in-depth look at the Lotus Carlton. The origins of the Carlton can be traced back to the late 1980s, around 1987, with the release of a new rear-wheel drive sedan called the Opel Omega or Vauxhall Carlton in the UK, with both cars winning European Car of the Year that same year. One of the key factors of the Omega and Carlton winning European Car of the Year was due to its stellar aerodynamic performance, with its drag coefficient as low as 0.28, which helped it maintain high speeds without using much gas as well as horsepower. With the base 1.8-liter four-cylinder making 80 horsepower, but was still able to have a top speed of 110 miles an hour or 177 kilometers per hour. With the biggest 3-liter inline-six engine making 155 horsepower, which was good for 135 miles an hour or 217 kilometers per hour, which was insane for the late 1980s. However, this wasn't enough for Robert James Eaton, who was head of General Motors at the time. Neither was it enough for Mike Kimberly, who was the boss of the Lotus company that General Motors purchased the year prior. During the release of the Omega, Lotus and General Motors were already working on the aluminum quad-cam 32-valve LT5 V8 for the C4 generation Corvette ZR1, and CEO Robert Eaton figured that making an insanely fast sedan would be a cool way to show everyone that Opel wasn't just some mundane car company. The Carlton project began in 1988 when the project started using the flagship Senator model, which was basically the same car as the Omega with some lavish styling, and would have the same Lotus-developed V8 from the C4 ZR1. However, CEO Bob Eaton wanted this new V8-powered Senator to debut alongside the ZR1 at the 1989 Geneva Auto Show. But with only a couple of months remaining, there was one problem. A V8 wouldn't fit on the front frame rails of General Motors' V platform unless structural modification was done. This meant engineering costs as well as extensive crash testing, and most importantly, time, which was basically non-existent. So the LT5, the Etna V8, as well as the 5-liter V8 from Holden, which was General Motors' Australian brand, were ditched for the straight 6 of the Opel Omega 3000 GSI. The 3000 GSIs would then be shipped to Lotus Engineering in Hethel, England, where the inline-six received extensive modifications, such as a longer stroke forged steel crankshaft which increased the stroke from 69.8mm to 85mm, which increased the displacement from 3 liters to 3.6 liters, and adding two T25 Garrett turbochargers set to 0.7 bar or 10 psi. The forged Mahle pistons reduced the compression ratio from 10.0 to 1 to 8.2 to 1. This was done to account for the increased cylinder pressure due to now being boosted, with the output going from a rather modest 201 brake horsepower to 377 brake horsepower, along with making 419 pound-feet of torque or 568 Nm, with the red line of 6,200 RPM. The next thing that was needed was a transmission, and there was only one transmission that was up for the job, which was the ZF 6-speed developed for the C4 ZR1. However, Chevrolet had an exclusive contract with ZF, and they obviously had no interest in helping Lotus, but Lotus ended up getting it anyway. Now equipped with its ZF transmission, the Carlton was able to hit 60 miles an hour or 96 kilometers an hour in 5.1 seconds. Lotus added AP Racing 4-piston fixed calipers with 13-inch or 33cm ventilated discs in the front, and AP Racing 2-piston fixed calipers with 12-inch or 30cm ventilated discs in the rear, coming equipped with ABS with cast-iron rotors. The wheels were manufactured by Renault that were a diameter of 17 inches and measured 8.5 inches wide in the front and 9.5 inches wide in the rear, and came equipped with Goodyear Eagle tires that were 235/45 ZR17s for the front and 265/40 ZR17s for the rear. The Carlton received its limited slip differential from the Holden Commodore. The suspension was also fully reworked. Up front, the Carlton utilized McPherson strut suspension, with the rear using multi-link axle with semi-trailing arms which improved high-speed stability and handling. There was one more thing Lotus was concerned about, and that was its semi-trailing arm rear suspension exhibiting too much camber change when fully loaded for safe operation at top speed. To combat this, Lotus added the self-leveling rear suspension from the Senator. Then, Lotus slapped on a Lotus VIN since Opel didn't want it to be called an Opel or a Vauxhall. The Lotus Carlton / Lotus Omega were sold across Europe, with the Lotus Carlton having 320 being called the Lotus Carlton, 250 of which were designated for the UK market, and the other 630 being called the Lotus Omega. In 1990, the Lotus Carlton sold for £48,000. Criminals weren't exactly lining up at dealerships to pay for them. Instead, they were stealing them. Multiple Lotus Carltons were stolen, with the most legendary of all being 40RA. On the 26th of November 1993, a Lotus Carlton with the number plate 40RA was stolen from a home in the West Midlands. What came afterwards was weeks of ram raids on businesses, stealing £20,000 worth of liquor and cigarettes, which nearly equates to £46,000 today. The criminals got so cocky that they even raided a store 30 yards from a police station. And what was used in every raid? An Imperial Green Lotus Carlton. The local police didn't have an answer to catching the Carlton because their cars were Austin Maestros that barely touched 90 miles an hour even with the strongest of tailwinds. And the Carlton can reach speeds of 177 miles an hour on the M6 motorway, which was faster than its saloon counterparts like the 5-liter V8 powered Mercedes-Benz 500e, as well as the 3.8-liter inline-6 E34 M5, along with being able to keep up with the V12 Ferrari Testarossa. The Carlton even had stories about it outrunning helicopters, although those stories might be a bit of a reach since the Carlton couldn't go that far. According to Lotus, the 18-gallon fuel tank can empty in less than 40 minutes at top speed, which was probably for the best since the transmission differential could overheat after 30 minutes at top speed. 40RA met its unfortunate end in January of 1994 as passers-by spotted it in a canal with its signature Imperial Green paint with a caved-in roof. The Daily Mail as well as the British Parliament wanted the car banned in Britain, but since it was so expensive and sold so poorly, the Carlton would be discontinued in December of 1992 with a total of 950 units produced, falling 150 units short of the 1100 goal. From its inception in 1987, the Carlton was a car that was meant to show the world that GM Europe was serious about building a performance sedan, and it showed with their purchase of the Lotus Engineering Company. The Carlton and Omega are a perfect example of a perfect car, combining comfortability, brutal acceleration, absurd top speed, and inconspicuous looks that only an expert observer can detect. Even though the Carlton's days of terror tearing up the M6 motorway and evading police are long behind it, the Carlton gave influence for other manufacturers to build their own versions or improve on already existing models, making it one of the more influential cars in automotive history. With its engineering prowess, it will stand as a testament of what a performance sedan should be.